Thank you for joining us another episode of the Pelican Scoop podcast. I'm your host, TK, and we have the privilege of being joined by Brandon Scoop B. Robinson. Now, Scoop is not only a world-renowned journalist, he's also an expert NBA insider with Bally Sports. He's a fashion aficionado, and he's an overall basketball fan. Scoop, how you feeling tonight, sir?
Brother, that's an introduction. I'm doing all right. Thank you for the opportunity to sit and talk with you. You're doing great things over on Pelicans land, and I have a lot of respect for all that you're doing, all that the Pelicans are doing, and glad to be in the land of the living with the Pelicans fans who will watch this.
No doubt about it. Thank you for joining us today. Now, before we get into the hoop segment, I want to kind of maybe ruffle a little feathers out there in the world today. So I read that your family used to own a shoe store in New York growing up. Mm-hmm. So I kind of get that maybe your sense of fashion was kind of rooted there. So with that being said, would you say that you're the most fashionable insider in the industry?
Yes.
Simple as that, right?
Yes.
I've seen the Instagram posts. I've seen the drip, man. You got to go and know I had to put it out there, but you're confident in it, and you're telling the truth, man. You're telling the truth.
You have to be able to be relatable to the people you cover, but also balancing it out. And I feel like when I'm looking at people who are in my industry, who are insiders, I don't necessarily think we're comparing fashion there, because I look more towards the Jalen Roses, the Jay-Z's, and players like Bron, Carmelo, Chris Paul, and others that are. I look more towards the players. Ben Simmons, I think, is a phenomenal dresser. So I don't necessarily think that's fair to compare, but at the same time, I take pride in what I put on.
Yeah. Top two, you're not two. I can understand that. So let's get into the hoops now. And so down here in New Orleans, everybody is excited for the start of the season. There's so much promise. There's so many expectations when it comes to the Pelicans. And I know you personally were in the building for the Pelicans' first home preseason game versus Detroit. So just kind of from your perspective, how was that seem like the fan excitement and the atmosphere surrounding the Pelicans start of the season?
I think the Pelicans have just really been in a journey of making ends meet since right before the start of last season. And I think this is a continuation. I mean, when you look at the Pelicans, it really started from their selection of a coach. There were a lot of guys that were, in that process, even Ime Udoka, as well as you looked at Mike D'Antoni, who ended up being a consultant to Willie Green, but coaching a great deal of you got to give a lot of respect to that, because I think he set the tone. Willie Green, you talk about Detroit and the guy that played at Detroit Mercy. Willie Green, I got a chance to really watch him during his days in Philadelphia. I went to college right outside of West Philly. And really saw how that team with Larry Brown and as the head coach, he was on his way out, but Allen Iverson, the Kimble, Matoma wasn't on that team, but there were a bunch of guys that were holdovers from that championship appearance in 2001, some that carried over there, Aaron McKee, but he really is connected to the young folks. You see it even outside, like a guy like Kevin Ollie, who I think once he finds his wings in the NBA as a head coach, I think is going to connect the same way. But I really think that, it starts with knowing whose team it is. That's Brandon Ingram's team. CJ McCollum comes at the right time, where I kind of feel like he's the elder statesman or the brand ambassador of Pelicans basketball. A lot of times people in years past didn't necessarily want to be there. We're talking about the Drew Holidays. We're talking about, the Lonzo Balls. But CJ McCollum seemingly wanted to be there. He had a relationship with Willie Green prior to coming there, and Brandon Ingram. And I just think that all pieces were falling into place. The Pelicans, I think, like the Minnesota Timberwolves, are kind of, in some people's mind, the casual fan or the person that only watches national games. The Pelicans are kind of like this fly-by-night, but if you look at the architect that is in the front office and the diversity that is in the front office, it's no wonder that you're creating such a winning product, and they're looking to kind of continue that process this season.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned Brandon Ingram, and you also talked about the casual fan. And to most casual fans, Brandon Ingram kind of became a household name for the first time last season, finally making the playoffs, doing well in the first round versus Phoenix Suns, averaging 26 points a game on 40% shooting. When you watch a guy like B.I. play, what most impresses you about his game?
That he was somebody before he came to the Pelicans. But, I talked to Brandon after the trade deadline last season, and he talked about the sorbet ice cream that he and CJ McCollum shared, as well as a multiple course meal alongside Zion Williamson and Willie Green. And there was a meeting of the minds there. I think two things happened. One, there was a meeting in the minds. Two, CJ McCollum kind of critiquing Zion Williamson in the media. It kind of ruffled feathers, but it created a result that was needed. Ingram, being from North Carolina, being a mentee of Jerry Stackhouse, but also being a wonder in his own right. To me, I feel like it wasn't until last season when they went to the playoffs and this summer when the Pelicans and the Nets did engage in conversations about Kevin Durant. Do we really have the desire to protect Brandon Ingram at all costs as the face of the New Orleans Pelicans? And I think that when you're winning, people give you an added look. But he was a Laker, and I was with him on draft day when he was drafted, and he talked about how much Kobe meant to him as a player, as a person, and to kind of be under him and see him in LA, and like I think that was special for him. But it seems that many stars who became stars, who played under or played alongside LeBron, are stars elsewhere. Even with Lonzo Ball being out so far this season, he showed flashes of who he's meant to be in New Orleans. And then you saw it at points in Chicago. And I think people had to retemper expectations. And I think the same went for Ingram. He couldn't play alongside LeBron. LeBron commands a lot of attention and commands the ball in his hand quite a bit. And when you look at his career, he's never had to adjust his game as a playmaker. He had to adjust his game as a scorer in Miami, but as a playmaker, he's never had to adjust his game. And I think that clashes with someone of Ingram's ilk. You got to let the bird fly. And I think you see it with Kyle Kuzma now in Washington. So I think with Ingram, I think any fair weather fans better bring their raincoat, better bring their Scully, better bring some shorts to go to Bermuda, because I think he's here to stay for a period of time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And even a guy like Kevin Durant hopped on that a couple of years ago when he says watching BI's game is like looking into a mirror. Because you got a guy who was extremely athletic. He's tall, he's lanky, he can get anywhere on the court, he can drive, he can finish, he can shoot over the top of defenses. He's got the total package. And I think he's only going to get better and better. And what's most interesting about Brandon was kind of the leadership role he's taken over. At Media Day, Coach Green talked about how much of a catalyst he was for getting the guys together in the offseason, for workouts, for practicing, for that camaraderie, to kind of start that offseason program to get each other ready for the season. And I think that's going to prove dividends, especially with a guy like Zion Williamson. And you talked about, CJ McCollum's kind of criticism of him, steering him in the right way. You've seen him. He's hired a trainer in Jasper Bibbs. He's gotten to the best shape of his career, as everybody says. He's on a nutritionist plan. So, he's cutting out all the foolishness when it comes to just sticking straight to basketball. And he's been active in the community. And so when you look at Zion and being integrated back into the Pelicans, it's been over 500 days since he played a regular season game. But the last time we did see him, he was that force in the middle. What are you expecting to see from him this season?
A healthy version of him that is any iteration or combination of Sean Kemp, Clarence Weatherspoon, Charles Barkley, Zach LaVine, Vince Carter, and Corliss Williamson in one. I think the thing with Zion that I think he'll realize as he gets older is it's cool to have a fast car, but knowing when to speed on the highway and when to be low profile. Always go with black. Don't go with red. But at the same time, jet black can have some fun too as a speedy race car, just picking your spots. You can go grocery shopping with jet black. You can pick up a lady with jet black. You can go across country with the jet black, but just knowing when and how. Lamborghini doesn't advertise. Just be a Lamborghini, but also know when to take out that junk car when you're rolling through the hood. You don't want people to know how much money you have. So it's finding that balance between both, and I think he's learning that, and he'll be all right.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the Pelicans have a lot of learning to do, being that it's such a young team. So many of their key players are 25 and under. So when you look at the rookies that were last year coming to that second year, a guy like Trey Murphy III, Jose Alvarado, Herb Jones, those guys were integral in the success of the Pelicans down the stretch. Out of all the rookies, those were 1, 2, and 3 in rookie minutes played in the playoffs. Those 3 guys with the Pelicans. So kind of from that group, who do you see kind of making that next leap from year 1 to year 2 to get even better?
I think Jose Alvarado is going to continue that growth and that process. I've tell people often, Brooklyn native by way of Georgia Tech. It's something about those Georgia Tech point guards. You look at Kenny Anderson, you look at Stephon Marbury, and he's from Brooklyn with like Stephon. So there's definitely a connectivity. Just I think the difference is he prides himself on his defense. Marbury was more of a scorer and a 5-star athlete. But I think for Alvarado, Malvi, different style, and really has won the respect of people outside of just New Orleans. Herb Jones, to me, is a monster. And I think that the thing that I like about the two of them is in spending time with them, they're both friends, and they enjoy seeing each other be successful. But, it really starts from, I talked about the coaching staff, even outside of just Willie Green, Teresa Weatherspoon, assistant coach with the Pelicans, I've known for years during her time in the NBA in the 90s, and then being, an assistant coach with the New York Liberty. And I think that with her and her ability to connect with those players in that locker room, it carries over to the floor. Jaren Jackson is another, not Jaren Jackson, I'm sorry, Jaren Collins. Jaren Jackson will play for the Spurs, and then his son, Jaren Jackson, plays for the Grizzlies. But Jaren Collins also is a brainiac on the basketball side of things. But specifically to your question about those rookies, man, they're special. I really am excited to see how in year 2 they just elevate.
Yeah, no doubt. And fans are looking for the same thing. And kind of try to temper expectations a little bit, but fans are short for fanatics and everybody's all exciting, but you have to sprinkle a little realism. They're playing in the loaded Western Conference. So when you have the return of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to the Clippers, you got the defending champs and the Golden State Warriors coming back, the Denver Nuggets, Memphis Grizzlies. Out of those teams, where do you feel like the Pelicans kind of rank in that pecking order in the Western Conference?
Or between 5th and 6th. Mm-hmm. I feel like the Lakers are in a similar position there between 5th and 6th. Mm-hmm. Because like, as you mentioned, the West has got so much better. The Warriors are the defending champions. To be the champs, you got to beat the champs. I really do think that the Clippers are in a good position because they're healthy. And this is the first time since Terrence Mann, as he shared with me, that they've all had hands on deck healthy since he's been here, but you added John Wall to the puzzle. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they're just going to make it to the finals because, like you mentioned, the Denver Nuggets to me have gotten better. That despite the fact that they traded Monty Morris, they got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the shooter that they need to alongside Jokic. I think that when you look at the Western Conference, the Suns are still there, despite people feeling like it's a bit melancholy there. Everybody still at this point has a 0-0 record. The Timberwolves will stay busy, but they still have to gain all of that experience. And I think that Anthony Edwards is going to take a significant leap this season. And he's got a luxury of being that red car on the highway and having a lot of protection in the post, whether you have Gobert or you have Towns who, floats between positions 3, 4, and 5 in that system. But, looking at the Pelicans, I still do think they have a good product. But sometimes the sophomore album can kind of flop versus the freshman album. So I'm hoping that the sophomore year is not an awkward year. I hope that it's still a propelling year for them, for this organization.
No doubt, and that would be welcome to fans who are just really looking for consistency and stability. As you mentioned before, a guy like Willie Green has really brought that to this team. I mean, before last year, Willie was the third coach in 3 years. So
Right.
being a guy who could relate to players, like you said, was the complete opposite of what a guy like Stan Van Gundy was, and that's why that they didn't respond to Stan's attitude and stance toward the team. But just kind of looking at Willie like that, do you see him as kind of like the next great NBA coach?
Willie Green,
Yes.
he has the potential to be. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think when you look at Willie, um, a lot of it is just relatability. Like you talked about Stan Van Gundy, and it's no disrespect to Stan at all. But there are certain coaches who did not play that still get respect, and there's certain players who, even if they didn't play, they naturally and automatically get respect because they did. And I feel like most player in the NBA, most players don't remember a Willie Green highlight. You got to be a basketball nerd to know who
Right.
Willie Green is. And if you do go that far, then you say, oh, he played at Detroit Mercy. He's Rashad Phillips. They went to the same college. And then you look a little further. Oh, he played alongside AI. Oh, he played along this person. Like, it's interesting because when you look at Doc Rivers was looked at the same way. Most people know him as being Dominique Wilkins. Some people, not all. Dominique
Mm-hmm.
Wilkins' teammate, Patrick Ewing's teammate, Charles Oakley's teammate, and then he coached the Celtics. He coached the Orlando Magic. People know him as a coach of the Celtics with KG, Pierce, Allen. Then the Clippers. So I feel like Willie Green has the potential to kind of go that Doc Rivers route, where solid role player, but leading teams with great players, and potentially in the next 20, 30 years will have the ability to be named as one of the greatest coaches, just like Doc Rivers was. I mean, Doc Rivers
Mm-hmm.
and Eric Spoelstra are both considered that. And within the last 15 years, they've guided teams, and so they're mentioned in the same breath as a Phil Jackson, a Greg Popovich, a Red Auerbach, and what have you. So Chuck Daly. So, I think in the next 20, 30 years, as the next generation of players are taking form, and coaches and more, I think that's where you'll see potentially the Willie Greens mentioned in the same way that Doc Rivers found his way in that echelon of greats.
No doubt. And Pelicans fans will be hoping that you'll be Willie Green coaching that team to success the way Doc Rivers has had with the teams that he's had in the future. But all that success will start on Wednesday, and the Pelicans are looking to get off to a good start. Historically, they've not done well kind of getting out the breaks to start the season. And so they're taking on a team that you're very familiar with, the Brooklyn Nets, who've had, I guess, a chaotic offseason to say the least. Kind of where do you think the Nets psyche is heading into the game on Wednesday night?
How do you get all those guys, meaning first and foremost the big three, to mesh? But you've seen that in the preseason, and you've seen that in videos and more. The Nets are bigger than just three guys. I think that in the 4-year partnership, you've not seen a healthy big three. You tried it with Harden, and I know that there are some regrets that they let Karis LeVert go. You've let Jared Allen go. And so they're still very thin, in my opinion, in the big man position, but they're not at the same time. And I'll tell you why. I really think that Ben Simmons and Nicholas Claxton are going to be the prototype screening role in today's NBA. I really think, well, everybody's paying attention to KD and Kyrie and Ben Simmons as, singular players. They have guys that they've added that they really can spell them in big minutes. I think TJ Warren, when healthy and when he comes back into the fold, is going to help them in the second half of the year. Seth Curry, if healthy, can do the same thing. I like Yuta Watanabe. He can play positions 3, 4, and 5, and I also like the fact that the Morris twin is there. They need some jerks. They don't just need nice guys. And I think that Morris is going to be for Brooklyn what they thought Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan could be. I just think that they're in a good position in the borough of Brooklyn, and they'll compete in the East with Philly, Milwaukee, and even a Cleveland Cavaliers team who I think really won a lot of people over this offseason in a world where everybody thought the Knicks were going to get Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of the Knicks story every year. But we're all looking forward to see the start of the NBA season is finally here for the Pelicans. That starts on Wednesday night at the Brooklyn Nets. Just for any Pelicans fans who may be in the New York area, maybe visiting up there to try to catch the game up there, any recommendations for food spots or eateries or anything like that to do?
Yeah, Melba's Soul Food in Harlem is always a good place to go, as well as Amy Ruth's. If you're looking for something more lighter, there's a lot of places in Manhattan. I would also advise you guys, if you're looking for just an experience, when people come to New York, I think for a tourist experience, they should try a few places a couple times. I think Junior's cheesesteak cheesecake, is still a must. And BBQs, their barbecue wings and their frozen drinks are still something to write home about. But there's a lot of other more upscale stuff that you can find further up the block in the 50s area and even in the Lower East Side. So come to New York, definitely have a good time. And follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Scoop B and ask me any more recommendations that you might need. I'll give them to you right there.
You heard the man. He says he's the best dressed insider in the industry. He's the NBA insider, Scoop B. Thank you once again for your time, sir, and joining us tonight.
Brother, thank you for the opportunity to be myself.
No problem. Take care. Once again, this is another episode of the Pelican Scoop Podcast. I'm your host, TK. You guys take